Mr. Ju, it's been 9 years under this government. Canadian workers today get about 58 cents of investment for every dollar American workers get. And this is even before the capital gains tax hike takes place. Do you think that this capital gains tax hike will negatively impact what businesses invest in their workers?
It's quite possible, given that the inclusion rate will increase for corporations, but it's also introduced at the same time as the lifetime capital gains exemption is increasing for small business owners, and at the same time that there is a new exemption for certain types of entrepreneurs. However, for larger businesses, there is no such exemption, and it's quite possible, knowing that the behavior of businesses is dependent on the overall tax rates they pay, it's quite possible that the amount of investment will be lower, other things being equal.
Yeah, and exactly. So, just for you to confirm that what that could mean is a higher capital gains tax could mean less investment on workers' paychecks, on investing in equipment, growing the company, or even hiring more workers, which we know Canada's in a productivity crisis. Can you confirm that these are some of the knock-on effects of this?
That would be what you would normally expect, as I said, other things being equal, but that may not happen equally in all sectors, especially sectors where there are other tax incentives.
Absolutely. The government admits that there's 300,000 businesses, most of them small businesses, that would be affected by this capital gains tax hike. That means there's hundreds of thousands of businesses, and that's millions of workers. Canada is in a productivity crisis, as per the Bank of Canada. They said this is a break glass emergency crisis right now. Could this also impact the job creators and those businesses, making productivity even worse?
A number of groups have mentioned that it will impede or not restrict, but it will lower investment that would otherwise take place, and de facto also reduce employment. Again, other things being equal.
So that would, and in other words, reduce productivity.
It's not something that is favorable to increasing productivity. That's
exactly. Okay. We've seen over the last 9 years of this government, because of their policies, we've seen $460 billion of investment flow to the U.S. or outflow out to the U.S. We've seen U.S. GDP per person has increased 50%, whereas in Canada, it's only grown 4.7% in the same given time. Do you think investors are less likely to invest in Canadian workers? And this capital gains tax hike would or could have a knock-on effect of having U.S. workers getting a higher paycheck due to investment leaving Canada?
Well, as a general rule, if you tax something, there is less of it. So if you tax investment, other things being equal, again, it's likely, and evidence suggests or literature suggests, that there should be slightly less of it if you tax something.
Okay, fair enough. I want to continue on with the conversation my last colleague had about the carbon tax scam. When the report was released, it was admitted that about $25 billion is what the hit to the economy would be because of this carbon tax scam. And it took Conservatives pushing on this for this report to be released by the department. Have you done an analysis, or is there an estimate on what impact this would put on Canadian on government revenues at all?
In our March 2022 and 2023 reports, we provided estimates of the potential budgetary impact related to carbon pricing. And essentially,
would that include this $25 billion hit to the economy?
It would include our estimate of the impact on real GDP. So our estimate at that time, I don't have the dollar figure, but it was 1.3% in terms of the reduction in real GDP. That's compared to the 0.9% reduction.
And what does that mean? Does that mean it's because businesses would invest less in their own businesses and workers would have less?
It's essentially that reflects the economic impact of the distortionary tax of related or the distortion created from carbon pricing. So households having to
Less.
shift.
I just have one quick last question. I just wanted to confirm one more time that given even this report, given all the information we have today, including whatever error, which I think was corrected by you rightfully, Mr. Giroux, that at the end of the day, that a majority of households will be worse off when you factor in the economic and fiscal impacts of the carbon tax scam.
We know it's true if you factor the fuel charge and the output-based pricing system. We are in the process of updating our analysis to isolate the impact of the fuel charge.
But that conclusion will not change, in your opinion.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
Thank you very much. And I must admit, I'm a little exhausted, as I would assume you're so even more, Minister Giroux, about litigating the carbon tax. So, like, I'm not here to play games. I'm just gonna say this like it is. So, if you just take the fiscal impact, it's 8 out of 10 Canadians are better, and they can quote me and they can put that on there. But the reality is, the truth of that is that once you include the economic impact, 6 out of 10 Canadians are worse off. Is that not correct, Mr. Giroux?
When we include the economic impact of the fuel charge and the output-based pricing system, it's true that the majority of households are worse off, and we are in the process of updating our analysis to try to isolate the fuel charge, the impact of the fuel charge itself.
Yeah. So when economic and fiscal impacts are combined, as you said, the majority of Canadians are worse off. That's correct. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giroux. And one last thing on the carbon tax, and then I promise I'll move forward. But the government's own report appears to validate your conclusion. Is that correct?
That is our understanding because they arrived at an estimate of a negative 0.9%, rounded to 1% of GDP when including the fuel charge and the output-based pricing system, where we had 1.3% in 2030. So that's in the ballpark, and that's very close for that type of analysis.
Yeah, and my apologies. I'm just reminded by my colleague that I need to get you actually on the record, even though I got a nod. So I'm just going to repeat my previous question. As you said on page 4 of your report, when you include both fiscal and economic impacts of the carbon tax, of the fuel charge, the majority of Canadians are worse off.
Our report also included the output-based pricing system, so it's not just the fuel charge, it's the fuel charge and the output-based pricing system. And considering the economic impacts and the fiscal impacts of both measures, yes, the majority of households are worse off.
Thank you very much for that. How much time do I have left? Perfect. I just want to talk, as my initial round, we talked a little bit about the budget and some of the projections. We talked about the capital gains. Another area that I have concern about the projection is with respect to the government's prediction of saving billions of dollars by reducing the size of the civil service. The civil service has grown since 2015 by over 40%, and now they're telling us that they will begin a plan by saving $1.3 billion in next year's budget by reducing the civil service by attrition. Do you share any of the concerns? Because when I talk to department officials, they never have a plan for reducing the size of their footprint.
I share these concerns because the budget indicates that they'll be reducing the number of FTEs in the public service by 5,000 over 4 years by attrition. But the budget also has a number of measures that will are reasonably expected to require more public servants. So it will either mean that there will be more reductions in certain sectors to make room for this increase in some areas, while also reducing the aggregate size by 5,000, or there will not be any reduction at all.
Yeah, and so we potentially could see greater losses in the civil service, and the other negative outcome that is perhaps likely is the fact that instead of the civil service being reduced in size, they may actually grow. And if that were to happen, if the dollars that are forecasted for reduction, that would put the government off of its fiscal anchor of debt to GDP ratio, would it not?
It would probably absent reductions in other areas to compensate for that. And I'd add that based on historical results where departmental plans indicated a reduction a reduction to come in their overall number of employees, we have seen instead increases. So that's on good. That's what I'm basing my assessment.
So either
on.
the government's going to miss its fiscal anchors, or the civil service is going to have even more cuts than are predicted.
It's either cuts to the
different,
public
maybe.
service or reductions in other areas if the government is to meet its fiscal targets.
Thank you very much. I'll get there. Mr. Chair.